to another video. In this video I would like to talk about the anger of Thomas Alexandre Dumas, which was what he came to be known as, which was why he was named Dumas, because in the English it was then said as in dumbass. Why would that be, and how does this correlate now when we look at the story of Thomas Alexandre Dumas? And how is he an archetype of Christ? When we analyze oddly enough, when we analyze the story of Thomas Alexandre Dumas, you would find out that he was heavily sodomized, not by just his father, but was then sold at parties to be sodomized by his father's guests, because he was the most beautiful man in the world at that point. And everybody wanted a piece of that. And now, in terms of the anger of Thomas Alexandre Dumas, which we then see develop in the character arc, we see his personage change into the Black Devil. But in terms of the actual personage that Thomas Alexandre Dumas was, he was a man of good heart and of good faith, and he was of innocent mind, which the people would then call him dumb. But because he was a beautiful man, he was just seen as a piece of ass at that point, hence the name Dumas. Hey Dumas, come here. We want to talk to you. And now you see that in the continuous sacrifice that Thomas Alexandre Dumas not only presented in his, excuse me, the dogs are going. Thank you. Now, in terms of the actual story Thomas Alexandre Dumas must now endure, where now he is not only just disowned by his father, he must now make a name for himself in the world. Meanwhile, his father, whom is supposed to be the next in line to the heir or the throne of France. In the telling of the story, Thomas Alexandre Dumas must now fight his way up the ranks of the military in order for him to marry the woman he loves, or to simply ask for her hand in marriage. In doing so, we see the character arc now where we see the anger that Thomas Alexandre Dumas might have internally felt but never expressed out of the goodness of his heart. Out of the goodness of his heart, he never expressed it outwards in a negative way, unless if it was in a time of battle, which is why he was such a fearsome fighter. But he had an Achilles heel. And what was Thomas Alexandre Dumas' heel? Well, what was he named? Dumbass. Because that's all he was a dumbass to the world. A person of good heart that no matter what it would take, no matter what was put onto them, and still out of the goodness of their heart would still give everything to assure that the world would continue to be given a good faith going forward. He would fight for the right cause, even though he was shown evil in his entire life. Now, when we see the idea of Thomas Alexandre Dumas, where in his particular life, now where he is now imprisoned, the moment he is meant to arise and ascend to the throne, where he is then meant to rot for the rest of his life, because he is different And even the people could tell he was different. And in his condemning is where we see the similarity or the likeness of the Christ archetype, which is why Thomas Alexandre Dumas would end up writing the Gospel of Thomas, as he ended up finding himself the state of being known as the Christ consciousness. Even in the story of Christ, he would have been called a Dumas in the mental lashings and the whippings and the beatings before being crucified, which he would then be punished to take on the world's sins in order for the world to feel better about themselves, essentially. And now we see the return of the King, whom even through everything that's been put, and even in the cell, that which the King still obeys within, because the world does not wish to accept this truth, because the world is not ready to be purged of its sins. We are all sinners. What makes you more able to say, I am greater than you, than another? Well, that depends. Are you the target or are you the hunter? Because see, if all of a sudden Christ took on a hunter-like mentality, where he became an individual, just as Thomas Alexandre Dumas, where he was given chance to release the devil out of himself onto the opponents he would be faced with. If given the same opportunity, you would have seen that Thomas Alexandre Dumas, or in essence, the story of Christ, would have been told in a different perspective, but it's not, because in the end, it's told from the perspective of suffering, which is what Christ and Thomas Alexandre Dumas would ultimately experience as a similarity. Infinite condemnation, countless efforts to ridicule and completely destroy every bit of public image that individual had in their life. Because the world did not want that individual to be who they were. They were not willing to accept that. Even the parents of Thomas Alexandre Dumas would have agreed to that particular point. Which now you see in Thomas Alexandre Dumas' life, the same story repeats itself in the return of the heir, which is meant to be the man himself. And yet in the goodness of this man's heart, he still takes it and doesn't put it back out. Because the world would be afraid at that point. And so the world continues to punish and punish and punish. And as a result, we now see the repetition of the story of Christ, which once again, in the lineage, we see the same story of suffering, of endless condemnation, simply for being different. And so, what is a monarch? A monarch is somebody that can take it, because he even gave his life for God, for the people. And the sacrifice the monarch made of giving his life for the world, in the moment of his sacrifice, the monarch united with God and was now ignited as the vessel for God to walk the earth once again. But the individual that left the suffering is simply just a husk at that particular point. because that's what they've made him to be. That's what the world has turned that individual into. And yet they accept the evil they may commit to that individual, but if the individual was to act in any way the same as the world acted towards it, the world would then see it as evil, which once again arises the oldest faith, the Lamb of God. And the Lamb can either kill or be killed, but the Lamb is not a dangerous animal. And as a result, it simply just accepts its fate. And because of this, the Lamb, even Christ, even the Lamb himself could sense the evil in the jackals around the world. Because the shepherd himself knew that there was evil in the world, and you could only guide the sheep so far. You can only group the people, you can only group the lambs so much. But eventually, even at your post, there may come a landslide, as I've stated in a previous video. And even the lion now, which you must fight off. And in the lineage of David, we see a shepherd himself, which he learned how to whip the stone. Tremendous fighters have been brought into the biblical tales. Tremendous fighters have been brought into the biblical tales because they were of the same origin. But now we see that the rise of the Nazarite, known as Thomas Alexandre Dumas, was in fact erased from history because he was of a difference. And so where is he now? Well, 4 generations later, even to this day, the jackals still laugh at Thomas Alexandre Dumas in the Battle of Cairo, beyond that leaving the port to ascend the throne. Because that's what the hell Thomas Alexandre Dumas had to suffer through in order to essentially discover that in God is justice, and in justice it is not man, but it is God that has the last word. Thank you.